Hi everyone. After the Prime Minister's resignation, the British Conservatives must choose a successor now. There are enough candidates, but the race could tear the party apart. So far, 10 well-known Conservative politicians have applied to succeed British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. On Sunday, Trade Secretary Penny Mordaunt and Secretary of State Liz Truss announced their candidacy as the fourth and fifth members of the incumbent government. A new party leader could be announced on September 5th. That's at least what the Telegraph newspaper reported. Mordaunt emphasized there, our leadership needs to change. It needs to be less about the person at the top and much more about the ship. Well, she has made a name for herself as a vehement Brexit supporter and is very popular with the party base. Other candidates from the current cabinet include, as I said, Secretary of State Truss, Treasury Secretary Nadhim Zahawi, Transport Secretary Grant Shapps, and General Counsel Suella Braverman. Prime Minister Johnson announced his resignation on Thursday after massive pressure from his party. However, he intends to remain in office until a successor is chosen. The opposition, on the other hand, is demanding Johnson's immediate exit and a new election. Is it a Brexit then? There are also corresponding voices in the Conservative Party. The Tories have a clear majority in Parliament. Whoever becomes party leader also becomes Prime Minister. And the nerves in the Conservative Party are on the edge. The fight for Boris Johnson's legacy is likely to turn into a mud fight. The next few weeks will be terrible, is what the Times newspaper quoted an anonymous cabinet member as saying. The party will ultimately be torn apart. No sooner had the British Prime Minister announced his retirement than the trenches broke open. In the evening, potential candidates and their supporters fell upon each other at a party in a mixture of doom and gloom, and kind of civil war. There are allegations of extramarital affairs, violations of the corona rules, and dubious economic connections, as the Times wrote. MPs would be reminded what skeletons the other applicants have in the closet. The party wants to push the selection process through until the July 21st parliamentary recess. This means Westminster will see a daily mix of betrayals, pacts, and brutality over the coming week, the paper said. There is still time for applications until today, as the newspaper Telegraph reported. The responsible party committee wants to reform the selection process at its meeting today when I'm filming this, but they haven't yet done it. Accordingly, interested parties would have to take the backing of 20 MPs and no longer 8. This should reduce the number to the serious candidates, how they put it. Up to 15 applicants are feared. Other candidates include ex-Health Secretary Sajid Javid and former Secretary of State Kimi Badenoch, who resigned last week in protest at Johnson's leadership style. However, like Sunak and the candidate ministers, they are accused of remaining silent on Johnson's numerous scandals for far too long. Applicant Jeremy Hunt, once Secretary of State and Health, stressed that he had never served in Johnson's cabinet, which is a plus, I must say. That also applies to the head of the Foreign Affairs Committee in Parliament, Tom Tugendhat, a proven Johnson critic. Javid and Hunt announced in interviews with the Sunday Telegraph that they would reduce corporate income tax from 25 to 15% in the event of a successful candidacy. Zahawi also spoke out in favor of tax cuts. However, the trio is not one of the narrower circles of favorites. Hunt had already applied for the party chairmanship in 2019, but was unable to prevail against Johnson. First of all, influential MP Tom Tugendhat and Attorney General and Brexit advocate Suella Braverman had come out of cover. Finance Minister Rishi Sunak, who resigned in protest against Johnson, announced his candidacy on Friday. Equal Opportunities Minister Kimi Badenoch, who has just also resigned, and Transport Minister Grant Shapps made the ambitions public on, I think that was Saturday. Secretary of Defense Wallace, meanwhile, announced that he would not run for office. Observers had counted Wallace as the most promising candidate. It is expected that other members of the government will apply to succeed Johnson. Sunak is currently considered one of the favourites for the Tory chief post. In a recent poll of Tory members, Sunak finished first, just ahead of Truss, and that makes me shiver, really, to hear that. The former finance minister, who enjoys the support of senior Tories, is an example of how divided the party is. Some praise him for his measures to combat the pandemic. The others slander the politician, who would be the first prime minister with Asian roots, as a socialist. Although he resisted for a long time, Sunak had enacted an additional tax on the profits of energy companies in the fight against skyrocketing costs. Liberal analysts don't leave a good hair on the field of applicants anyway. The good news is Johnson is on his way out. The bad news is look at who's on the way in. That's the comment by Marina Hyde in the Guardian newspaper. For example, ex-Secretary of State Jeremy Hunt. Jeremy who? Sorry, I was bored before I finished writing his name, she said. If the Conservative base has its way, Mordaunt and Secretary of State Liz Truss have good prospects, as does, as I said, Sunak. The preselection is made by the 358 members of the parliamentary group. Only when 2 candidates are left do the party members decide. How many that is unknown. Estimates range from 100,000 to 200,000. When the race is decided, according to the Telegraph, this should be the case by September 5th, the mudslinging should not be over by a long shot. Many voices are already demanding that the winner call a new election. Otherwise, opponents would have an easy time denying the legitimacy of the new resident of 10 Downing Street. But there is a problem. In polls, the Tories are well behind the opposition Labour Party. This is reflected in a survey by the opinion research institute YouGov in the Times, because if the public had the choice, the most promising applicants would be named none of them, and I don't know, by a large margin. And then there is Boris Johnson. The shadow of the still Prime Minister is likely to hover over his party for a long time, especially since Johnson is unlikely to resign quietly. He announced his resignation as party leader on Thursday after an unprecedented internal party revolt over a series of scandals. This also sealed his end as head of government, but not yet. However, he announced that he would remain in office until a successor was elected, which, could last until autumn, or most probably will. As he announced his withdrawal, he began to knit a step in the back, the step in the back legend we had this year in Germany after the First World War. The party made the eccentric decision that new leadership was needed, despite its achievements and overwhelming mandate, he said. So there's no sign of insight. The populists did not use the word resignation at all, and Johnson still has supporters. MP Christopher Jope complained that the party would regret the day it saw off the Prime Minister. And the atmosphere is heated. Culture Minister Nadine Dorries, loyal to Johnson, complained that the search for a successor had unleashed the hellhounds. And the new Secretary of State for Education, Andrea Jenkins, gave the opponents of the government the middle finger. You might have seen my video on that one. Supporters referred to Johnson's role model, Winston Churchill, who became Prime Minister again in 1951 after a break of a few years. Don't write him off, advertised the supporters. All previous candidates are rushing to break away from Johnson. A restart is necessary. For example, Kimi Badenoch announced that she wanted to tell people the truth again. But Badenoch was also a member of the government, and she remained silent about Johnson's scandals, such as the Partygate affair, as well as Sunak and the other cabinet members who are still allowed to apply. Opposition leader Keir Starmer mocked the leadership as nodding dogs. The Tories, are nodding dogs at a whole? Well, they have to get rid of that image, or the next general election, the end will have a Liberal Democrat majority. I don't know. I'll see you in my next video. Passt auf euch auf.